This episode was recorded live at the Jeff James Agency Studios. Appreciate my man Jeff for letting us record there. If you're looking for any protection, have any insurance questions, hit me up. My number is 412-728-4302. And my email is dclavene@gmail.com. So yeah, that leads me into the guest for today's show. His name is DJ Nugget. He's pretty much a DJ legend. Been doing it for the past 20 years. Been all over the place. Roots are from Pittsburgh though, and right now he's the owner of two bar/clubs. One is the Goldmark over in Lawrenceville, and the other just recently opened about last year is Scenario down south side. So check those places out. Give my man some support. If you want to stay connected with him, trust me, you will. He's got crazy mixes. They're so dope. Just at DJ Nugget, pretty easy, or go to his website djnugget.com. That's where he's got all of his mixes. So like I said, listen to them. For me, chillinwithdeek.com. That's my website. Follow at chillinwithdeek, all social media. And yeah, that's about it. Keep the intro short. I think we are ready to start the show. All right, chilling with Deke. We're back with none other than DJ Nugget.
Hey.
How's it going, man?
Hey, great. Thanks for having me, Deke. Appreciate you.
Dude, no problem.
Take a sip.
I know.
Let's get it started off right. I'll join you.
So, dude, do you remember how I met you?
Yeah. Just at Goldmark, right?
Yeah, I just popped in.
Yeah.
And just was like, dude.
Was I DJing or was I just hanging out?
You were chilling in the back.
Yeah, it was like a random weeknight, right? I think it was.
It was either weeknight or Friday night. I can't remember. But
how long ago was that, do you think? It was a minute.
It was a year ago.
A year
It
ago.
would have been at
Okay.
least a year ago. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I was trying, because we talked about this for a minute.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of went back and forth, but I think at the time, yeah, I was like losing my mind because I had a couple other things going on.
Oh, no, well, I know. Here's the thing. I didn't know you were opening up Scenario down there.
Yeah, so if it was about a year ago, yeah, we were right in the thick of it because we opened November last year, and it was like, we were coming down to the wire because we had set a date. We originally wanted to open Halloween, and then we knew that wasn't going to work out. So it was literally right around this time where I was like, oh man, I had just had a million things going on.
No, I know.
So
I expect that type of stuff.
Hey.
People got their own lives. People are doing their things. But I remember mentioning a name to you. I don't think you really recalled it whenever I met you. One, the music's blasting, so I don't even think you really heard me. But I actually listened to your Real Feel.
Oh, yeah.
Like way back, probably whenever I was in high school.
Oh, wow.
So that's how I recognized the name.
Okay.
I'm going to drop one right now. Phil Scott. Does that ring a bell? S-Bar.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So he was the one that gave me your CD. I'm working for him at Giant Eagle. He was like a manager. This is, like I said, whenever I was in high school.
Okay.
And he's like, yo, you want some dope music? He gives me you, and I think Fashion.
Oh, yeah.
Like your mixes. And
Yeah.
dude, they were so sick.
Thanks, man.
So sick. So fast forward, I start the podcast, and I do an interview with Anthony's Locker.
Oh, yeah.
And he's telling me about all these dudes like I should interview. And he mentioned your name.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, oh, damn. Yeah, I got to interview this
That's
dude.
what's up.
That'd be so cool. I love his mixes and shit.
That's what's up. That's
So-
my dude.
Yeah, dude, I think that's a cool story. I guess a little bit, right?
Yeah, no, man. Honestly, man, like I'm amazed. I started making those mixes in 2008. So I'm amazed to this day the amount of people that hit me up and tell me they got their hands on that, and that's how they found out about me. But I used to pass those mixes out like crazy. I used to have parties for them, and when I traveled, I would give them out. So the impact that those had, the little bit of impact they had on my DJ career was really cool. So yeah, that's a really awesome story, man. I invested so much money into those mixtapes because being a full-time DJ, I had to be really smart with my money. So I was like, I want to make these mixes, but even then, 2008, 2009, CDs were kind of becoming irrelevant. Like you could put your mixes online even then. So to shell out $1,000 to get a bunch of CDs made was kind of like, it was right before, you know.
I mean, you're just passing these out for free then?
That's it, man. Yeah, I didn't want any money for them. You know, it was just because you couldn't even really couldn't really sell them then.
Yeah.
Because you could, you know, and then I would put them online, but I would always try to wait a little bit till I put them online, so people would want to get their hands on it and like put it in their car, you know.
Yeah. Who would you be giving them to?
Anybody and everybody.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the first people that I would give them to were like my DJ friends and just be like, check this out, let me know what you think. And then I would always have you mentioned S-Bar, I would always have a mixtape release party at S-Bar once a year. And it was always like in the summer or fall. And yeah, those were always like really great parties. And then that just kind of like fueled my whole next year. And those mixes, nobody ever really asked and nobody ever really knew. But the whole point of those mixes was, at the time, everything was all the DJs at that time were getting on software on their computers and making mixes that way. It's that they've been doing that for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, to me, that was always kind of like faking the funk. And I was DJing so much already at the time and coming up with all these mixes and remixes and stuff that I was like, well, I'm just gonna sit in my apartment and record these mixes live. That's why I called it Real Feel, because it was me actually sitting there live in my place. I would have like my photographer buddy come. We would drink a couple beers. I would DJ, and I wouldn't put the mix out until I did the whole like 60-minute mix live from front to back. So that didn't change until like 5 or 6 years after I started doing them, and then I started editing them a little bit because I got a little bit better with editing, and like I realized I didn't have the time to do that. Right. But I'll never forget the first one I ever did. I was with my buddy Evan Sanders. Shout out to my buddy Evan. He was shooting photographs, and we were just having a couple beers. It was like 5 o'clock in the afternoon on like a Sunday, and I just kept doing the first like 10 minutes of the mix over and over because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist and I wanted it to sound perfect. But that mix took me that entire night to record live because I just kept starting it over, and I'd get halfway through it and screw something up. I'd be like, nope, we're starting it back over. And so it just took forever. But yeah, those are good memories to reminisce about.
Bro, it's so funny you said all that because this was probably at the time when I listened to your mixtape. I'm like, bro, I want to like F around with this and see what I can do. So that's exactly what I was doing. I was on like some virtual DJ, trying to like put my own shit together. But it's the opposite of what you were saying. Going that whole, so you're going the full 60 minutes and making sure you keep going at it before you get it right.
Yeah,
that's nuts.
Just the records in a mixer and just keep chipping away at it until you get it down, you know. And I had rehearsed it a million times too, so I knew exactly what I was doing. I could have did it with my eyes closed, but you know, just like I said, just trying to perfect it and make it sound really good. And that first mix I ever put out, it was in 2008. I put mixtapes out before that, but the first Real Feel. And I knew it was going to be like a yearly thing, but I'm still really proud of that mix. It was kind of like the amalgamation of like all these years of DJing and like all these different styles of music that I wanted to play and put on this mix. So it was cool.
Dude, they're so sick.
Thanks, man. So sick. Thank you.
Yo, I want to go back though. So you as a kid, I remember my pastor saying this. I don't know why I remember this, but he said whenever he was a kid, he looked up to some other speaker at some point in his life, and he was just like, you know what? I see myself doing that one day. Yeah. And never really happened until like 10 years ago. Like his life was full of all different types of things. He was in construction, like building houses. Actually did like missionary work over in Africa, but never really a pastor. But like 10 years ago, he actually did it. Do you remember like a moment? And I kind of compare those two, like pastor and what you do, like someone speaking and what you do, because you're moving people. You're out there like influencing them and trying to. I guess influencing would be the best way. Do you remember a time like just when you were a kid, just some type of moment, maybe you were looking up to someone or there was some type of scenario you're like, damn, maybe I will do this like one day. Like I could see myself doing this. Yeah. You didn't know how it was going to happen, but
so I think with DJing, it was a little bit different whenever I started. But I know I'll relate to what you just said in like two ways. Before I started DJing, I was really into dancing. So I got into like hip hop dancing and break dancing when I was really young. And I would go to like these high school dances or, you know, middle school dances, and I would dance, and I went to a really small school. So I kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. And, you know, everybody would make the circle around you and you'd be doing...
Why, because you were just killing it? Like you were...
Well, I mean, dude, I graduated with 55 kids in my whole class. So I'm not going to say I was like killing it, but I mean, for where I grew up in a really small town. Nobody's really doing that. So I think when I was doing that, they were kind of looking at me like, okay, you know, this is different. I think some people thought it was cool. Some of the kids probably thought it was the lamest thing they ever saw. But I liked being the kind of the center of attention there for a little bit and having people's attention. So I enjoyed that. But DJing kind of came into play in a different way. I kind of got thrown into it. I was really into music. My high school needed a new DJ because the DJ had graduated. So I got a little bit of a loan from my parents to get some gear, and with some help of another really good friend, he helped me kind of put the little DJ business together. And that was actually my first job I ever really had. And I never really thought of it as being the center of attention whenever I was DJing, because I think back then it was more just like you were kind of off in a, you know, like a dark section of the auditorium or even the club back then. And you were playing music, and, you know, even looking back then at like club DJs or bar DJs, back then it wasn't such a big thing. Like you were just, a lot of people didn't even know who the DJ was back then. You were just playing the music, trying to make people dance, watching the crowd. You know, occasionally you might get on the microphone. It's a lot different nowadays. Like you're really, the DJs nowadays are really like the center of attention, you know, whether they're on a big stage at a festival or they're in a club, you know, in a big DJ booth and everybody's looking at them. So it changed a lot, but I do agree with what you're saying. You definitely, I saw it from my first gig, the impact that I had on some kids that were at the dance and couldn't wait for the next dance. And, you know, and this was a long time ago. So, but yeah, I agree with what you're saying in a certain sense, for sure. As far as like looking up to somebody back then, when I first started DJing, I only looked up to like the kid that kind of I took over for, because he was the only person I really knew that was doing anything like that. And then, you know, back then it was like you watched MTV, you listen to the radio, and it was so funny because like even back then I didn't know what they were doing. I had no idea what the DJ was actually doing. I knew they were just playing songs together, and the thing that like hooked me was I wanted to hear two songs that I knew mixing into each other.
Right.
So that just like I was like fascinated by that. I was like, I want to do that so bad. I just thought it was so cool, and I thought that I had a really good ear for that. So yeah, so we kept it moving 20 some years later.
Well, bro, isn't your first gig, isn't that a funny story? Wasn't it at the high school? Can you share that?
Yeah, so my first gig was I always mix this up. I think it was my sophomore year. Yeah, it was my sophomore year. It was called the Sweater Hop, or maybe it was Homecoming. Those are like right around the same time. This is a long time ago. So, but we set all of our gear up. It was me and my buddy Ron, and he basically bought the amplifier. Back then you had to bring an amp and everything. He bought the amplifier, and I had the speakers, and then we literally had a Radio Shack mixer and 2 Sony Discman. So I had all the CDs. He brought some of his CDs, and then we literally just played one song on one side and then faded it out and played another song on the other side. You know, and at the time I thought I was mixing, you know, if I heard the 2 songs together at all, I thought I was like killing it, you know. I knew, I didn't realize how long of a way I had to go. But,
oh man.
But yeah, to make a long story short, I have a bad tendency of making long stories long. My wife always yells at me.
Oh, dude, I don't care. You got time, man.
Our amplifier blew up within like the first 30 minutes of the dance. So that was like the most horrifying moment of my teenage life.
What'd you say to the crowd?
So we couldn't say anything to the crowd because it was basically, you couldn't use a microphone or anything. So it was like, I have no idea how many kids were in that room, but it was my entire like auditorium, you know, where we played basketball in high school. And it was probably like not as many as you think. It was probably like a few hundred kids. And I remember yelling and being like, we're going to get it fixed, you know, give us a minute. And I'm like sweating behind the table. I'll never forget that feeling. But there was literally nothing we can do until my buddy Joe, who's my best friend to this day, actually, he ended up running up to his house where he grew up, which is like, you know, up a hill right behind the high school, ripped his brother's amplifier out of his room, which his brother was like a really scary dude at the time. He was like the king of the football, or the captain of the football team, like a huge dude. And he like ran back down the hill with like this like, you know, 100-pound old Kenwood amplifier and got in. Like at that point when he walked back in, everybody's literally just like sitting on the dance floor or in the auditorium, you know, Indian style, just like I think we had like one of the teachers had grabbed like a boom box and we were just playing like some album that had come out. But yeah, Joe saved the day, man. He came in, I unplugged everything, we plugged everything back into the new amplifier, and that ended up working. And funny story is I kept that amplifier up until like, I probably got rid of that thing maybe like 5 years ago, and I'm actually pissed that I got rid of it. It's like such like did
you just toss it? You just get rid of it?
Yeah, my mom was cleaning out my parents' attic, and she was like hitting me up about stuff, and I had a bunch of stuff going on. I was just like, no, it's okay. And I think I said something like, no, hopefully like some kid will get a hold of it and maybe he'll start to do something. So I always look at it like, some kid hopefully got a hold of that and like is listening to music in his bedroom. Yeah, exactly. Maybe it's like a magical amp, who knows.
How'd you get that gig? Is that that was your first one? Like, no experience. Like, how'd that happen?
No experience. It was just being from a really small town, going to a really small high school. It just so happened that the kid that had graduated, he kind of took me under his wing. There was 2 kids basically, and weirdly enough, where I grew up, everything was really spread out. So like our high school was like, pretty far away from where I grew up in a really small town. And there's all these like little small towns, like in all these little pockets, but we all went to this really small high school. It just so happened that the 2 kids that were DJing in my high school were both from my town and grew up literally like 10 houses away from me in both directions. So they kind of took me under their wing and they were like, hey, if you have this, this, and this, you can DJ. And, they didn't even really know, honestly, like what a lot of the stuff that they were doing. They were just playing songs too. But the thing that connected all of us is that we all like loved music, and really that's all it comes down to at the end of the day is like you can be a DJ if you love music. Like you just got to love it,
You mentioned being from a small town a couple of times.
Yeah.
Did you always want to get out? Did you have like dreams of getting out of the small town and doing something big?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if it was ever like big, crazy dreams, but I knew I always wanted to end up in the city. Whether that was, I always thought I would end up in New York, to be honest with you. And up until 10 years ago, I still thought I was going to end up in New York. Maybe like 15 years ago, actually. But I knew I was going to end up in Pittsburgh or, somewhere like that. So
yeah. All right. So what's going on? All right. From this point, high school, you're doing a couple like dances. You're keeping the DJ thing going. What happens like after that? Like just the timeline. Are you doing other jobs in DJing? Are you going to college? Like what's the play from there?
So started DJing when I was 15 at that dance, and that was my sophomore year. So all through high school until I graduated, I did every dance, after the football games, all that good stuff. And I kept doing like little stuff in my town and birthday parties or whatever. And I was using the same equipment for the most part up until I graduated high school. Then I got turntables, graduated the vinyl. That's a whole nother story. Had no idea what I was doing with that because nobody I knew played vinyl. But during this whole time, I was really heavy into breakdancing. So that actually opened more doors for me than DJing actually did, because that's what actually started taking me to the city. I used to go to these, under 21 clubs. There was a ton of under 21 clubs in like the Western Pennsylvania area outside of Pittsburgh when I was younger in my high school days. And we used to basically go to those, like every club had like their poppin' night. It was like Friday at this place, Saturday at this place. In the summers, there was a place in Harmerville back then that was really big on Sunday nights in the summer, and it was basically all city kids. So we would all go dance there. There was like a crew of us from my hometown, and then we met all these random kids through all these random places like Greensburg, Cranberry, Latrobe, all over like the Western Pennsylvania region, and we'd all meet up on those nights and like chop it up. We'd dance, we'd start circles, we'd cut up, whatever, and that actually opened the doors to get into Pittsburgh. And then from there, I basically graduated high school. I took a year off. I took 6 months off, and I worked for a landscaping company. In between time, I was working at McDonald's. That was like, my parents made me get a job at McDonald's to get my driver's license because they didn't look at DJing like it was like a valid job, So, so I ended up getting a job at McDonald's. That was when I was still in high school. And God, I'm all over the place right now, but let me think here.
Dude, took
6 months off. I worked for this landscaping company, and I was basically just like working for this landscaping company, and then going to do like breakdancing shows all over the East Coast on the weekends.
Yeah.
And then I was miserable trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I ended up going to community college for a year out in Westmoreland County. And then from there, I always did really well at school. I just never really liked school, if that makes any sense.
Oh, I'm the same way. Same way.
I feel like there's a lot of people
I hate school, but I was always getting good grades.
Yeah, you know? I was the same way. There was only like a math was my that was my only weak subject, so I always steered away from math. But go figure. Now I own a bar and I have to do math all the time. But so I ended up getting a scholarship to go to Point Park through Westmoreland County Community College. And, you know, that was great. But at the same time, I literally had no clue what I wanted to go to school for.
Right.
So really funny story. I was still dancing all the time, super heavy into dancing. At this point, I was actually teaching a hip hop class with a really good friend of mine. And we had like this huge hip hop class. And at the time, there was nobody really doing that in the area. So for two young guys to be doing it, we had like, at one point we had over 100 kids coming to our class on Sundays. Like it was a really crazy thing. We had a line out the door. It was really cool.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to Point Park. I got a scholarship. I could literally go for anything I want to go for, right? So my cousin Sherry was like, you should just try to go for dance. And I was like, yeah, you know what? This is like my passion, you know? And I'm still DJing at the time. I'm DJing this whole time too.
Yeah.
She's like, you should just try to go for dance. Like try out for a dance. Like maybe having the breakdancing or hip hop background, maybe they'll like do something with that. So really funny story. I take like 6 weeks of ballet, jazz, and modern dance, like on the fly lessons. Okay. Through the school that I was teaching hip hop dance at. And my cousin Sherry was one of my teachers. And I was just like, I could do this, you know. I was really bad at it, but she basically the way trying out for dance works is that you go and you have to try out in all three areas of dance. So you have to do like, I think it's like an hour of ballet, an hour of modern, and an hour of jazz. So I had no experience at all in any of these. Okay, so jazz was probably the closest one to hip hop because that's like steps and you know, you're spinning around, you might be doing some moves like that. But so I have this whole thing set up where I'm going to go try out. And I'm actually in my cousin Sherry at the time. She's a year younger than me, and she's trying out the same day. Okay, she's been dancing her whole life.
Yeah.
So we go into Point Park, and I'm literally wearing like tights. You had to wear tights. I'm wearing black tights and like a white t-shirt. And we go in, and the first thing we have to do is ballet. So I'm a little ahead of myself, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna kill it. You know, I'm gonna be good. I'm gonna do a good job. Like I was determined. I never had a more humbling experience in my entire life, dude. Like,
what happened? Like,
so there were like 40 people in this audition, maybe something like that, and it was all girls, and there were maybe 5 guys in the. All 5, not that this means anything, but at the time it was weird for me because it was so different for me. The 5 guys were all gay guys from different parts of the world.
That had to been so just like for you, like you're just like sticking out.
It was overwhelming to like a point that I can't even explain to you. So like we did the first part of the ballet, and this is how bad it was. Like I get up on the bar, and then you obviously know what ballet looks like. They're like, everybody up on the bar, you have to get up on your tippy toes. You're like, you know, and I'm like, I know enough to where I'm like, they're like yelling things out. I'm like, okay. But dude, it was so bad. There was a girl behind me and a girl in front of me on the bar, and they like, we're doing kicks. I kick the girl in front of me. I kick the girl behind me. The teacher's looking at me. She's like, in her head, you just tell she's looking at me. I'm sweating. She's just like, what are you doing? Why are you here? You know, but I didn't give up. And then I literally had a meltdown in between the two. We had like a 15-minute break, and then we had to go into modern. Modern was just like very out there for me. It didn't really make sense to me because it was very offbeat. You're just jumping around, and I'm not disrespecting anybody that does modern dance. I have a newfound respect for it now because I understand a little bit more. But that was a disaster as well. And then we did jazz, and jazz was really funny because I could do it, but basically how they do jazz is they show you it's like what you would see on like a dance instruction video or something. They show you a little bit of the dance, you do it, then you do it again, then they show you a little bit more, and then you do the whole thing through, and then they show you a little bit more. So it keeps getting longer and longer and longer. Yeah, yep. So it's a lot of muscle memory. And I realized very quickly that I did not have the memory for this, and I couldn't. I was doing really good up to a certain point, and all the other girls were just killing it. All the other guys were just killing it. They're just putting me to shame. So after that happened, the last thing of the audition was they were calling us up in groups, and they were lining us up 2 lines. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the first group went up in 2 lines, and then I was in the second group, and they did the first part of this dance. And the whole time I was thinking, oh, if I can just get called out into the second line, I can follow the person in front of me once I can't remember anymore. So I was like, please call me in the second line. Please call me in the second line. Well, they ended up calling me out in the second line, and I was all, jazzed about it. I was like, yeah, this is going to be great. I'm going to follow this girl in front of me. I'll be able to like follow her. Cause I could still follow the dance, but I was just forgetting steps. And then right after they finished and I was following this girl the whole time, they were like, all right, now back line move to the front line move to the back. And then they made you do it all over again. And then I was just forgetting everything. So yeah, man, to make a long story short, I've got done with that. And one of the teachers said something to me like, I don't want to say it was like super disrespectful, but it was something along the lines of like, yeah, maybe next time, or, like something. And I walked over to them and I was like, hey, listen, I'm really sorry. I didn't want to waste your time. I was just really nice about it, very respectful. I was like, I come from a different background, and if you give me like 2 seconds, let me show you what I can do, and just so they could see. So I like.
So you still.
They did. They did, and they gave me a minute, and I had the whole dance. All the dancers were there, like watching. A lot of them were like clapping, and I did like a little routine. I did a head spin and some other stuff, some other technical terms. I'm not going to bother your crowd with. But they were like, that's really cool. And if you decide to come to school here, maybe you could still do something with breakdancing at the school. So I still ended up going to Point Park. Did not go for dance, obviously. I went for broadcasting, which I thought maybe I'd get in the radio because of DJing. But I was still kind of heavy into the dance, the dance game at Point Park. And I ended up teaching a little bit of a class there by myself. I was still teaching hip hop at a school outside of Point Park. And really funny story, I only went to Point Park for 1 year. I ended up dropping out, but at the end of the first year, they had a dance battle, and I ended up winning the dance battle for the whole school, and I wasn't even a dancer. So it was a really, really funny end of the year story for me.
That's nuts, man.
Yeah.
So all right, you drop out, and what? What are you doing?
So I ended up dropping out. And, there's this whole other side. That story is just like a random funny story to share. But the whole time I was at Point Park, living in the dorms, I was DJing, the school events there. I was DJing.
How often, like per week? How often you DJing probably?
That first year of school at Point Park, I was DJing every Tuesday, every Thursday, and then on the weekends, like sporadically. Anything I could get my hands on, I would play at. And then Monday nights, I would also play a party like at least once or twice a month. So it's kind of a lot for, a freshman in college to be out until 3 a.m. every night.
Yeah, man.
But I knew, that's part of the reason I knew that, and I still did fine at Point Park. I made Dean's List. Like I did good, but I just knew like, I'd be sitting in my classes just thinking about what songs I was going to play that night, or who do I need to hit up to come through and hang out, So anyway, end up dropping out, and I almost ended up going to this school in Florida. It's called Full Sail, and it's like a film, audio production school, still around to this day. Ended up not doing that because I was going to go for music and like audio and like studio work.
Yeah.
Ended up not doing that because at the time I was really good friends with a kid who ran his own home studio. And this is way before home studios were this easy. Like this was really hard to get a hold of, even like having 2 mics.
Really?
And oh yeah. I mean, this is a time when like something like this setup would cost like thousands of dollars.
Really?
Yeah. So for my friend to have his own studio, he went to a really big recording school in Canada called OI Art. And he was like, dude, if you want to learn more about recording, just come and intern for me, and I'll teach you what you need to know. You don't need to go to school for it. So that changed my view on school a lot too, because I was just like, man, and that Full Sail, that school specifically was really expensive, and I had no money at this time. I was going to be paying off my Point Park loans at this time for like another 10, 15 years. So yeah, man, I just ended up deciding to like, put my boots on the ground. I got a job. I had a job with Red Bull at Point Park too. I didn't mention that, but I was doing some things with Red Bull. And whenever I ended up quitting or dropping out of school, I ended up working for Red Bull. And this is when Red Bull first came to Pittsburgh. They didn't even sell Red Bull in the stores yet. They were like trying to get it into like college kids' hands.
Oh yeah. So when is this?
This is 2001.
Okay.
Yeah, 2001, 2002. So it was the reason I remember specifically. It was right after 9/11. So so I started doing stuff with Red Bull, and obviously a really cool brand. They were doing tons of really cool stuff back then. I actually got introduced to Red Bull through breakdancing. They saw me at a breakdancing show and asked me if I wanted to do stuff with Red Bull, and I was like, yeah, this is awesome. So I'm actually still a huge Red Bull supporter to this day, and I still do stuff with them. But so I ended up working with them, and then anytime that there was like a gig or something that they needed a DJ for, they would throw me the love shot, give me the opportunity to play for their people or their parties or whatever. And obviously to this day, Red Bull just exploded. I mean, it's so big now.
I mean, this is nuts to hear. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's
this is
so
like
cool.
Yeah, this is before like they were in any stores or anything. Really crazy. And I just kept working with them. I worked for Red Bull for actually a really long time, and it gave me the flexibility to DJ a lot more too. So I worked for them part-time, and basically what we did was, and you still see them to this day, they're called the Wings team now. It's all girls. They drive around those little cars with the Red Bull cans.
No, I know what you're talking about.
Back in the day, they used to drive around these huge trucks with the Red Bull can. So I was one of those guys. And we would go, we'd do everything. We'd go to like, festivals, college campuses, campgrounds, like you name it. We were going to it every other day. I was in that truck driving somewhere in Western Pennsylvania, meeting all kinds of people. So I use that as another outlet to let people know, oh yeah, I DJ too. If you're ever in Pittsburgh, check me out, this place, whatever. And then that's pretty much it, man. Red Bull was the last. I did sales for Red Bull for a little bit. I went from marketing to sales for like 6 months. Absolutely did not enjoy that at all. I was just driving around a van all day, like listening to music. It was nice for maybe like the first month, but I just the thing that always like got me down was that I feel like I could have always been using my time wiser. Like I'm like, I could be doing something more with DJing if I just put my head to it. So yeah, I right after that, the whole game changed for DJing because Serato came out. I don't know if you're familiar with Serato, but it's when you see DJs on their laptop now, that's Serato. So pre Serato, it was still carrying all of your records to your gigs. So like when you saw a DJ in, pre 2004, 2003, 90% of the time they were still carrying around records or CDs. And whenever Serato came out, it basically gave you the opportunity to put your whole music collection onto your laptop, but you could still play like you were playing on vinyl because they made these special pieces of vinyl. They're called timecode vinyls, where when you're looking at your computer, you have your left deck and your right deck.
Got you.
You just click and drag a song up in a deck. You put the needle down on the record, just like you learned, just like I played on records forever, and it literally sounded and played exactly like a regular record. But, complete game changer, because at the time, every time you did a gig, the next day or that weekend, you'd be going to the record stores and spending all your money on the records. That was just, part of the game. Like if you got paid $50, you were spending half that on records for the next gig. That's how you built your record collection. Man. So whenever Serato came out, it just totally opened the doors up for so many things with DJing because, at the time I had so many DJ friends, we literally all just sat down together and we were like, let's trade music. So we were like ripping each other's records, giving each other hard drives full of stuff, and then all of a sudden your music collection just grew and grew and grew, and it changed everything for DJing. I funny story. I remember Bonix. I was really good friends with Bonix. Before obviously he left with Wiz and everything, and he was talking to me in a bar one day. We were at Peter's Pub in Oakland. I'll never forget this. He was like, someday we're not, he used to carry the most records around, more than anybody else that I knew. It was like he couldn't leave his house unless he had like every record that he owned. And he was like, man, someday we're not going to have to take all these records, man. Like, I just remember him being like, they're going to make something, like we're going to be able to like play records, but we're not going to have to carry all these records. And sure enough, like 2 years later, he was the guy who told me about it. He was like, dude, remember that thing I told you about? They made it. It's a really funny story.
Dude, so Red Bull was your last like gig outside of DJing. Like, what was that moment? You're like, this is gonna be my full-time thing.
Yeah.
And I guess even how'd you market yourself and make sure that was like possible?
Yeah. So I have to give credit where credit's due, and that is really to Serato and to the digital age, because, you know, if it wasn't for that coming out, it really wasn't like a feasible thing to think like I'm gonna just DJ every night of the week. And, you know, it didn't really work like that. You had to spend so much money on equipment, and, you know, the records were the biggest thing. You know, I always tell people, I'm like, I liked playing house music back then, but I never really collected house records, so I couldn't really play them unless like I was maybe borrowing a friend's.
Yeah.
And then I was like, hey, I got offered to do this hour-long house music party. Can I borrow some records off you so I can play it? You know what I mean? So that was how it would work back then. Once the digital, you know, the programs came out, I was like, oh man, I already knew all these songs I loved. I was able to go online and buy them, or even order the CDs and be able to rip the CDs, or order the vinyl, rip the vinyl, have it on my computer. Borrow it off of guys. Like I was hitting up guys like, hey, I'll trade you these records if you trade me these. And then, you know, everybody was doing that then. This was before you could just like buy a song off of iTunes, you know? So that really changed the game. So I knew once I was, wrapping things up with Red Bull, I ended up working with a good friend of mine. He started a business that was like a printing and design company, and I worked with him for a little bit. We actually lived together for a while, so I was helping him out on the side. But he also threw parties in town. He was one of my main guys that got me into DJing in Pittsburgh. His name was Mo. He's actually visiting Pittsburgh right now. He lives in Chicago, but he was one of the guys that always kind of like looked out for me whenever I moved to Pittsburgh. Like he was one of my breakdancer friends, but he was also throwing events. He was bringing hip hop acts into town. He was doing all kinds of stuff. So he was the one who was always like, hey, I'm going to have Nugget open up, or I'm going to have Nugget, you know, close out this party. And then once I got good enough, then he was like, oh, I'm going to have Nugget headline the event. And then whenever we worked together and lived together, his business, he was constantly designing and, running around trying to find clients for printing, and I was helping him with all that. And then he basically was like, we need to just start throwing more parties and having you DJ more and trying to build your DJ career up. So that's whenever I really started DJing a lot. And I would say within a couple years, I was DJing, you know, I was probably 20, I don't know, man. I was probably like 22, 20 to 24 at this time. Maybe it was like somewhere in that age range. And I went from DJing like 2-3 nights a week to like 7. So it was like it happened like really quick. I basically, you know, and I tell DJs this to this day, if you can make yourself available and you let people know like you're hungry for the work, and it doesn't, you know, I tell young DJs all the time, like, take every gig that you get offered. Dropping the mic, sorry.
No, you're good.
I tell every young DJ I know, just take every gig you get offered. That's what I did, and it teaches you so much, because every gig's going to be something different where you're going to learn something different. You know, you might be playing you know, at the same time I was DJing in clubs and bars, people don't realize it. And still some of the biggest DJs in the world still do weddings, bar mitzvahs, corporate events, you know, anything you could think of. And that brings a whole other element of DJing into play, where you have to bring your own equipment. You have to, you know, you have to have all this other gear. You have to have this whole other technical side to yourself where you're like, okay, here's how I'm going to set the speakers up, plug in the cables, got to do the mic check, make sure the room sounds right, you know, blah, blah, blah. I was lucky because actually when I started doing that in high school, so I already kind of had that side.
Damn.
It was once I got into like the clubs and the bars, then I had to like kind of rethink, you know, this is how a night's structured, and this is how much a normal DJ gets paid for 4 hours of DJing, or, you know, whatever it might be. So, but yeah, anyway, I started DJing full time in, I think, 2004, I think. So, and that was up until we opened the bar in 2015. So it's a nice run. Nice. Yeah.
That's a hell of a run.
Yeah.
So what I found really interesting about what you said there, and I think I even heard you said this on another interview. Actually, I guess they're kind of the same. They're also kind of different, but you saying just say yes to every opportunity.
Yeah.
Like that's actually a big thing that a former guest I had on, Leanne Ford, she's on like
Sure.
HGTV. She said like that's all I did. Like out
Yeah.
of college, I was saying yes to all this different type of stuff. I had no clue what I was doing, but I would just say yes.
Yeah.
So you have that, but then you also said like, you know what, man, you just make shit happen, like, right? I heard this quote you had. It was like, you make shit happen. You don't let things come to you. You go out and do it. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead. I don't know. Just tell your side. Like, where does that come from? And like, just the ability to say yes, or even like you were mentioning, just start your own party. Go do it. Right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think that's a huge thing for sure. I'll get into that, but like, for example, like here's a funny story. So I get hit up. I don't even remember how old I was when this happened, but somebody hit me up to DJ their wedding. It was a family friend. I was so young at the time, I don't even think I had been to too many weddings. I might have been to a couple weddings, but it was weird because like I didn't understand there's like a flow to a wedding. This is how a wedding is like meant to go, you know? So, you know, I met with the couple. We talked about the wedding. I had no idea what I was doing. I wasn't even sure what kind of music I was going to play. I didn't know the crowd that was going to be there. I had no idea what I was doing. So, and a wedding is like a pretty big, it's for a DJ. Every DJ I know gets nervous when they do weddings. Doesn't matter how many you do, because it's so important to the people.
Oh yeah, dude, this is like a monumental day in their lives.
Yeah, right. But it's like things like this that normal people never think about when they're at a wedding and they see the DJ. Like most of the time when you see the DJ, like if something goes wrong at the wedding, there's nobody else to point the finger at except the DJ, right?
Yeah.
So if the mic starts humming, if their music starts crackling, if the music shuts off, you are, and that in most cases, that is the case with DJing. Like most of the time you're the guy, you know, even if you're at the club and the music goes out, everybody's going to look at you and boo. Mm-hmm. But a wedding is a whole nother thing because it's such an important day in those people's lives. So, you know, I'm meeting with this couple. I had already DJed a million events. I'm like, yeah, this will be easy. Like no problem. So I go into this wedding. And I'll never forget this. I get all my stuff set up. I had my girlfriend with me at the time, and she was just like hanging out with me like, yeah, this is going to be fun. And it was like right before the wedding started that I literally had like a nervous breakdown because I was like, oh my God, wait, what happens next? Wait, they're walking out, and like the wedding planner's like, oh, then we do this, and then we do this. And do you have the names for this and the names for this? And I was like, oh my God, I had papers everywhere. I'm so unorganized. And you know, that's like a perfect example of what I was talking about. Somebody asked me to do it, and I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. You know, and I didn't really think twice. And now, you know, it wasn't until that actual circumstance where I think getting booked for stuff after that, I was like asking way more questions. Like, okay, what exactly is the event? You know, I learned my lesson when I was really young. So even to this day, you know, I'm doing a wedding in 2 weeks, and you know, we had a hardcore meeting about the wedding last week, and it's, you know, I'm still, you know, using all these tools that were handed to me from that very first night when I did that wedding. You know what I mean? 100%. Things just stick with you. But yeah, I think it's really important, man. You just got to take on, if it's something that you're passionate about, like learn every aspect of it. You know what I mean? I just, you know, I got into DJing because I love music and I like making people dance. So, you know, you can love music and make people dance in a bar, a club, at a wedding, you know what I mean? Anywhere, on a stage somewhere. You know, if you're the hip hop performers DJ, you can get on the mic and, you know, kind of like Bonix does with Wiz, or, you know, any of those guys. But yeah, just take the work and just run with it and see what it leads you to. Cause you know, you might do a show with an artist and you might love it. You might love being in the background and like helping to conduct the show, or you might do a wedding and be like, you know what, this is really fun. I have a really good friend that does like 50 weddings a year and he makes tons of money, you know?
Yeah.
And he's a great DJ. He could play out, he could be doing all kinds of stuff, but he just really likes focusing all of his attention on doing those weddings because he took a chance and was like, I'm going to do some weddings. And then if you like, my whole thing was I always really liked playing out at bars and clubs. I wanted to be in the clubs, and there used to be a lot more clubs in Pittsburgh, but, you know, it was like, if there was something that I wanted to do and I didn't see an outlet for it, I just would go and approach the bars or approach the clubs and just try to do it myself, you know? And I like that side of it too. You know, so that's just a thing. Like, you know, there's a lot of DJs they moan and they groan about how they're not playing out or they're not doing anything, but all they really have to do is get off their couch and go out and try to make something happen. And I guarantee it will happen. Like I've thrown events at the Goldmark with DJs that I've never heard DJ before, but I literally booked them because of how passionate they were about it and how bad they wanted to do it. And they reminded me of myself when I was younger. And I was like, you know what? I'll give you a shot. If it stinks, then it stinks, and we won't do it again. That's, but I'm happy that I can be in that position now to give somebody that outlet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and this, I'm going to say it on this podcast. If there's other DJs out there that want to do events or that are looking for an outlet to express themselves musically, hit me up and let's talk. So,
absolutely, dude. So, it seems like just from me outside looking in, that things could get lonely sometimes being a DJ, like, and you might be like just questioning yourself, like, man, why am I doing this? Because like you said, you're probably going up to these owners, cold calling them, cold approaching, getting rejected, or even, I don't know, like maybe there's a bad night, like you're DJing and place is empty.
Oh yeah.
Like what? So I'll ask you this first. Maybe I'll follow up after you answer this. Like what I don't know, man, like how do you handle that? Like how do you stay positive, or like was there a point that you like doubted yourself? You're like, damn, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, but then like how'd you want to keep going?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, man. Tons of times. So like funny story, my buddy Zimmy, him and I threw parties together. I got him into DJing, and then he kind of took it to a whole nother level. He's killing it now. He's touring with Jazzy Jeff. He does all kinds of crazy stuff. But I remember whenever he first started, he really wanted to throw his own parties. And actually the first thing that he DJ'd, he couldn't get a gig because nobody really knew who he was. He just threw his own party. He met somebody and was like, look, can I come in on your worst night, your slowest night? He's like, I'll tell all my friends to come down. I don't know if they're going to come down, but it'll probably be better than whatever you have going on now. And he did this little, I think it was like a Monday night, which is like the hardest night of the week to get people to come out, at this little bar in Shadyside. And, he was just hungry. He just wanted to play, and he just made it work. And, my first gig that I did by myself in Pittsburgh was in the South Side at this little bar. And I went to the owners. I got introduced to them through another friend. And I was just like, look, I really want to throw a party on Thursday nights. I go to Point Park right across the bridge. I'll bring some kids down. What can you guys do for me? Like, I'll do whatever I can to get this going. And they literally were like, yeah, we don't have any equipment. You have to bring your equipment. You have to bring speakers. Like, we don't have anything. And they're like, we could probably pay you like $25. So, I was just like, why not? I'm not doing anything else from 10 till 2 in the morning, like most people aren't, So I was just like, hey, screw it. Let's do it. And, if we had a really good night, they would throw me a couple extra bucks. We ended up having a problem where a lot of underage kids came, and I had nothing to do with that, but it's college. And you just keep it moving. And from that experience, you just learn, you keep learning, you keep moving forward. But the lonely thing is funny that you said that, because no one's really ever like brought that up. And and that's a real thing, man. That's because I think a lot of DJs are loners. And I am too. Like, I don't mind sitting in a room working on something, listening to music all day. I can zone out in music. It's like, it's like my friend that we're just hanging out together. But when you're in a club or in a bar and it's dead and it's a Tuesday night and the owner has you there and, they could care less. The bartenders could care less. Nobody's really coming in. It's raining outside. It's Pittsburgh. It's snowing, whatever, and you're back there and you're just kind of like twiddling your thumbs like, man, I really hope some people come in. I really hope I don't get fired. I'm going to play this new Logic song. I really hope that the owner doesn't yell at me for playing it. What? So it's weird, like you have those, and then in the same time, in the same week, you might have the craziest Friday night ever
Mm-hmm.
where everybody's coming up to you and they're like, I had the time of my life tonight. It was amazing. And then in your head, you're thinking, where were you at on Tuesday?
Dude.
Like it's a lot of weird stuff like that. But I'll be honest with you. I worked, and I didn't even dip into that, but like I worked a lot of crappy jobs, like coming out of high school, coming into community college.
$25 for like 4 hours.
Yeah,
like, how does that even make sense?
Oh man, even before that, dude, I worked for an aluminum railing company where like I literally sat and drilled holes into these little metal things for 8 hours a day and threw them into a bucket. Like I did all kinds of weird odds and ends job like that to make ends meet. And to this day, I always say it when I'm like, I cannot stand when I hear DJs complaining about the stupidest shit, because I'm like, dude, most likely you're probably getting paid a pretty decent wage. People pay DJs a lot different now than they did then too.
Yeah, right.
But I would put myself in check when I would have those bad nights and be like, look, I would much rather have a shitty night DJing than work 8 hours and be drilling holes into little metal pieces and throwing into a bucket, And I still to this day think about that, like how lucky I was.
I think your point's good too. Like, what else are you doing in those 4 hours?
Absolutely,
right?
Man, for sure. Yeah.
Like why not hone your craft and get uncomfortable, maybe screw up a little bit, and
Dude,
then whatever else you'd be doing, playing video games. I don't know.
Yeah, and another thing, like, you can always use that time as practice. Like, if there's literally nobody in the bar, I mean, dude, I can't tell you how many nights I've had where literally not one person walks into the bar I'm DJing at. Like, not one. So sometimes the owners would just be like, screw this, we're closing early. Sometimes the owner wouldn't even be there, and the bartenders would be like, no, we're going to stay open until 2. So I would just be like, all right, well, I'm going to use the time to my advantage and work on a mixtape or work on whatever. And, when there's nobody in the bar, just stand behind those 2 turntables and just work on your craft, And that drives me nuts sometimes when I see DJs like at their gigs and they're supposed to start at 10 and then they don't end up DJing until 11:30 or something. Like, that was one thing that I was always like adamant about. It happens sometimes. It happens sometimes.
What do they do? Just show up later?
Like, if nobody's in the club or if nobody's in the bar, a lot of times they'll put a mix on or, whatever. Like, sometimes I don't blame them. I get it. Like, they might want to, like, catch up with their friends or, whatever until more people come in, or maybe they're talking to the staff or whatever. But I think for me, it was always like, I'd rather just put my head down and start DJing and get into a groove, because once the people did start to roll in, I would already want to be, like, well into my groove of my set and, like, ready to roll whenever the people came in,
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
How bummed out do you get that you're not, like, out in the crowd? You're the one. You're always the guy. You know what I mean? You're making the fun. Like, how bummed out do you get?
That's almost like a blessing and a curse, because I still love going out, and when I do get a chance to go out, which is extremely rare, I always have a blast. Like, I could sit at the bar, I could be dancing with my wife, but no matter what, like, I like the energy of being out. I think that's a huge part of DJing too. Like, when it is busy or when there are people, like, you almost have to be social. You have to be ready to talk to people, because people want to meet. They want to talk to you. They want to know that you're there now. It's a little different now. Remember how I was talking earlier about how the DJ was in the corner? Yeah. Now it's different, because the DJ is almost always front and center. People always are noticing you, So I think that's part of being out. Like, I always joke, the phrase FOMO, like fear of missing out. Like, even when I wasn't DJing, it could be like I DJ'd 6 nights in a row and I had 1 night off. If I was when I was in my 20s, like, I wanted nothing more to go out that night so bad, to, like, see what the other DJs were doing, to try to meet people, to try to just, run into people that I haven't seen in a while or whatever. So,
what would you think after that night, though? You're like, oh, actually, I'm not really missing out.
I'd much rather be DJing than just being out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to be conducting the show than just being part of it, So, I guess that answers that.
So, dude, you've been around the world, like, essentially, right? At least, maybe not the world, U.S., right?
I've done tons of stuff in the U.S.
Just crazy.
A couple things outside the country.
Yeah, crazy events and venues. You coming back to Pittsburgh, or even just whenever you're home, like, how do you reflect on that type of stuff? Like, what's your perspective of seeing all this other stuff that's out there from DJing? And I'm guessing you go out and about in these cities and check stuff out, but, like, just what's your perspective on life? What's, like, a takeaway that you have from seeing all these different things, seeing venues and people interact, and
for sure
all over the place,
Yeah, I think one thing that I always would think about being from Pittsburgh and then traveling, like, the first place I really started to go to a lot was New York, and obviously New York is huge, but I actually would go to things in New York and be like, we have similar stuff going on in Pittsburgh, Like, at the time, I remember when I first started going to New York, it was like I was DJing some hip hop parties and some other stuff, whatever I had an opportunity to do, some club stuff. And I was thinking, like, like this club in Pittsburgh is actually cooler than this club that I'm at right now, where like this hip hop party that we have in Pittsburgh is really good, and our TJ that does this party is actually better than this guy playing in this club. So I think that's one thing that I definitely took away. But at the same time, you know, the culture in New York's so different and there's so much going on. I was only taking that one little piece, and then I'd have a couple days off maybe, or I was going out with some people that were showing me some stuff, and I was just absorbing everything like a sponge. Like, you know, a lot of my ideas or a lot of my concept for the Goldmark came from New York, and I just wanted a small bar. Like when people were like, what kind of bar do you want to open up? I was like, I want to open up a really small bar that's really dimly lit with a good sound system and DJs playing all kinds of different music. And that's exactly what Goldmark is. You know, it's like a music lover's bar. So some of the stuff that I was doing DJing was bigger club stuff in like other cities like Miami, New York, or not New York, LA, Vegas, the West Coast. You know, it was a different vibe. That really stuck out to me, you know, it just taking in what every city had to offer, you know. At one point, Zimmy and I did this tour that was like Vegas, Arizona, California, different parts of California, and just seeing how different. That was my first time really out in the West Coast hanging out, and like hanging out with the DJs there. They were so different than the DJs I hung out with in New York. Like they were similar but different. It was weird. It's like a weird thing. Like the way they DJed, the style that they DJed, the places that we were playing at, they had a different vibe. The crowd was different, you know. That showed me the biggest difference between the East Coast and the West Coast, like mentalities. You know, the West Coast is really way more laid back. East Coast is very like fast moving, nonstop. And I think even Pittsburgh, some people call Pittsburgh Midwest, but I really consider us like an East Coast town because it, you know, anybody that I roll with is like a mover and shaker. Like they're trying to get stuff done. They're hustling. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't even know where I went with that question, but I hope that answered a little bit.
How'd you get all these gigs though?
Just meeting other DJs. That was the main thing for sure. Some corporate stuff.
And they just if they have a gig outside of the city or somewhere else, like they'll just hit you up like, yo, do you want to open for me or do this with me?
Just building relationships. So in the late 2000s, Zimmy and I started bringing in DJs to a nightclub in the Strip District from all over the country. LA and New York more frequently, but occasionally, you know, other cities too. Miami, Baltimore, I mean, you name it. But yeah, just building those relationships. And then, you know, it was surprising to me because we basically had this deal worked out with the club, and there was never any point where I was like, oh, I'm going to talk to this guy about playing in his city. I was never like that. That really came from Zimmy. Zimmy had a really good knack to be like, hey man, if we're ever out in LA, like we'll definitely hit you up. And you know, he was actually a lot better at building those relationships than I was. I actually learned a lot from him, watching him do that. And you know, it wasn't on some fake shit either. It was like on some genuine, like, hey, I might be out in LA in 6 months. I'll hit you up. So once he got the ball rolling with that, I learned really quick that like the DJ world is pretty small, and you know, people were happy to work together and do stuff together. So my first gigs in New York came from DJs that I met doing that. My first gigs in LA came from DJs I met doing that. Vegas, same thing. Like I never thought I'd DJ in Vegas. You know, ended up playing out there, met a couple people. Next thing you know, Vegas is actually really small. I mean, it's for the most part, the Strip anyway. And, you know, one thing leads to the next. If you do a good job, somebody hears about you. Next thing you know, you might get booked by like some, you know, management team. But yeah, more than anything, just building relationships with those DJs, you know, opened doors up that I never thought would be opened up. And then we also did a lot of corporate stuff too, which kind of corporate stuff was really crazy back then. We did a lot of stuff with Scion, Red Bull still. I was still doing a ton with Red Bull. But, you know, we might have, you know, the East Coast director for this company might be friends with the director in Denver. And they might be like, hey, we have these guys that are doing some cool parties in Pittsburgh. You should bring them out to Denver. And back then, I don't think the influx of DJs was as much as it is now. There wasn't as many DJs. So I think a lot of times they were just like, yeah, screw it. We'll give it a shot. We'll fly them out. So next thing you know, we're on a plane flying out to Denver to do a party or something.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, but it's a small world, man. It really is. Like at the end of the day, to this day, it's a small world. Like anybody that you want to meet, I mean, now
what do
especially
they say that's 6 degrees of separation.
6 degrees, man. It's even smaller now. You can slide into somebody's DMs right now and just be like, "Hey, I really love your." You know, somebody's probably has hit you up and been like, "I really love your podcast." Like,
well, that's how I've gotten a few interviews. I've done like we were talking earlier. I've done quite a few just in Pittsburgh of like interesting people here, but like there's people I've just seen on social media and like I've followed them. I'm like, oh, I really like their work. Yeah, just slid into their DMs or emailed them and hey, you want to do like an hour-long phone interview or something like that? I just want to hear your story. And it happens.
That's amazing, man. That's something I definitely learned. Like, people love to talk about themselves and talk about stuff they've done. I'm probably like the worst case right now because I feel like I'm talking your ear off.
No way, man. I'm digging this.
Yeah. It's just, I think like DJs are we're a funny bunch because like most of the time people don't give a shit what DJ. They're just like the guy playing music in the corner. So if you give us a couple minutes to tell our story. Sometimes, I mean, I have a lot of DJ friends. Their stories are way more interesting than mine, but yeah. I mean, we live in a world where, you can tweet at somebody and they might tweet back and you might become friends over Twitter. Like, you just never know. I've met tons of DJs through Twitter whenever Twitter first came out, just like, hey, I love that mixtape that you did. And like, it's, there's dudes I still talk to this day that I've never met in person, but like, I guarantee if I was in their city, they'd probably be like, oh shit, Nugget, come play at this Sunday party with me. And I'd be like, cool, that'd be awesome, So.
Bro, so what happens? You're doing your DJ stuff full time. What happens there? I mean, now business owner, two Goldmark and recently Scenario, right? Yeah. Like how does that happen? Because I mean, even back to earlier in the conversation, you're saying, yeah, I don't really like school. You didn't go to school for business, anything like that. Like, what made you want to become a business owner and start your own bar and do that thing?
So, I think DJing just by itself, I learned a lot. I'm a very big advocate of do it yourself. Mm-hmm. If you haven't figured that out now by listening to this, whenever I was DJing full time, I mean, the amount of business things that I had to learn so quick, like, from anything you could think of, insurance. I mean, it's a business. I was running my own business. I was a self-employed DJ. I had to have insurance. I had to have an accountant to do my taxes. I had to, anything that you could think of that was associated with just any other business. Mm-hmm. Just like, the manager at a McDonald's, like they were doing their stuff the same way as I was doing mine. There's obvious differences in the businesses, but at the end of the day, it really all boils down to the same thing, which is, can you make enough money to sustain?
Right.
So I learned a ton just starting my own DJ business, and learning from guys that had been doing it longer than me. And then once I started building relationships with bar owners and places that I worked at, a lot of times I would pick their brains and talk to them about their business. And, there were a few specific places that I worked at that I really enjoyed working at, where the owners treated me more than just the DJ. They treated me like their friend. They confided in me about really specific things about their business. They trusted me to help with their business. Because, a lot of times it wasn't just like we were showing up to DJ. A lot of times it was, like, let's sit down and have a meeting and figure out how to make Wednesdays better. Like, who can we get involved? And, all these different things. We need to get new flyers. Let's print out these flyers. Let's get a street team to pass flyers out in the South Side and put them on cars. Like, there's all these different things that come into play with, trying to grow your brand, So for years, I was just trying to grow DJ Nugget, putting out the mixtapes, putting, whatever it might have been, throwing parties myself, throwing events with other DJs, trying to get on some other party in Pittsburgh that I was a fan of, that I thought was a cool idea. Like, hey, I'd love to play this party with you. You're in a different neighborhood that I never play in. Let's play sometime. All this different stuff. But it wasn't until I really built the relationships with some of the bar owners where I was like, I always, in the back of my mind, wanted to eventually open my own place. That was a dream that I had even when I was a kid.
Really? So this actually goes back to the beginning, like you being a business owner.
Yeah.
Kinda.
Well, I remember going to the under 21 clubs that we talked about earlier, and I literally remember being like, okay, there's like 300 people here. They're paying $8 a head to get in. I was 18 years old. Like, I was just doing the math, and I'm bad at math. But I was like, thinking about back then, that's a lot of money. I was like, and then I'm thinking in my head, like, what's their overhead look like? I didn't even know the term overhead when I was 16, 17 years old. But I was like, I wonder how much it costs to run this place. But, it was stuff that I always thought about. But it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that people were like, oh, yeah, you can do this. And this is how much a liquor license costs. And, you can lease a space, or you can buy a building, or you can do that. And, there's all these things. Mm-hmm. So I literally had a notebook, and at a certain point, I was like, I knew I was going to open a place. I was like, I'm determined. I'm going to start saving money. And I'll never forget, it really became a reality because I went on this cruise ship. I DJ'd on this cruise ship in 2010 for a month by myself. Now, that was when you first said lonely, that was the first thing I thought of because that was the weirdest, loneliest DJing of all time for me.
Wait, real quick, why? Or what was the reason behind that?
I got booked through Norwegian Cruise Lines. They were looking, at the time, they were working with this company in New York called Scratch DJs, and I was the Pittsburgh DJ that was affiliated with Scratch DJs. And they were like, hey, would you want to go on a cruise for a month? It's, a full month, 4 weeks. You DJ every day for a couple hours.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the time, it's free. You can hang out on the cruise ship. You can do whatever you want. There were rules and stuff that you couldn't do, obviously. But at the time, I was like, yeah, this sounds great. I was getting out of a relationship. I had time off.
Yeah.
So I planned it out. I planned it for it was November. So my whole cruise was in November. And I'll never forget this, but Zimmy was actually he was on the cruise ship the month before me. We planned it out. So he went on, then I went on. Okay.
Yeah.
So when I got on that cruise ship, I'm by myself. I have my gear. I have all my stuff. I get on and I'm staying in his room. So I literally he's getting off the ship. I'm getting on. And we had talked, occasionally throughout the ship and throughout his time on the ship. But I was getting on the ship and he was like, wow, you're going to hate this. Dude, talk about the worst thing you could say to somebody. And I just looked at him and was like, really, man? And he was like, oh, man, I'm so glad to be getting off this boat. And I was just like, oh, no.
What made it so lonely?
So it was just weird, man.
I mean,
because
obviously you're on there yourself.
You are like a loner. You're by yourself. You're by yourself. You're the only DJ. So you do all the events. So basically my schedule was we left on a Sunday. So when all the new guests came on the ship, I did the hey, we're taking off out of New York party. So I played for 2 hours. We're leaving the dock. That was my first mistake, was doing in November. I thought, because the cruise went to the Bahamas, and I thought, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to the Bahamas. But leaving New York every Sunday was freezing cold, and they had me up on this deck, and it was I'm wearing a down jacket, playing records. The wind is blowing, the records are skipping. It was a disaster. My first couple hours DJing, I was like, oh my God, I have to do this every day. So I played on the deck 2 hours a day, and then at night I played in a nightclub on the ship. And my first week there was just so painful. And I'll never forget that Sunday came back around. We were back in New York. All the guests got off. All the new guests got on. And I was sitting there talking to my girl, who's now my wife, Nicole. And she was like, oh my God, I can't believe you're about to take off and do it for another week. And I was like, I have 3 more weeks to go. And it was just it was the first time I had felt homesick since I was at summer camp when I was in 6th grade. You know what I mean? It was a really weird feeling being an adult and being I do not want to go back out on this cruise. But what made the cruise for me, and I have to shout them out, was there's a comedy group on the cruise that Zimmy had introduced me to because he befriended them.
Yeah.
It was 5 comics from Second City and all over the country, Chicago, LA, New York, I think. And I befriended them because they kind of had a similar schedule. They were off during the day, then they had to go to do a rehearsal. While they were at the rehearsal, I was DJing up on the deck, and then we all met for dinner every night. And then I would go to their shows at night, and then I'd go DJ at the club. Some nights they would be doing their show in the club, so that made it so much easier for me on that cruise. And actually, 2 of them, I gotta throw this out there because it's so cool, but 2 of them are actually on Saturday Night Live right now.
Nah.
Yeah, Cecily Strong and Alex. They're both on Saturday Night Live.
Nah.
Yeah, Cecily's been on for years. And Alex just got on, I think, 2 years ago. But they're killing it, so I'm super proud of that. It's cool to see that.
Dude,
that's
so
really cool. And at that time, in my phone, I still have them. In my notes, in my iPhone, I had a note, and it was called Life Notes. And it was everything that I wanted to do once I got off that cruise ship. So it was I knew once...
Was this kind of you were talking about before in the notebook type of thing?
This is kind of the start, yeah. Well, that notebook was different, but this is kind of how that whole thing started. So I basically just started taking notes. I was reading a ton on the ship. I spent my days basically reading books, business books, self-help books, you name it. I got really into Robert Kiyosaki and all these different authors. That book was amazing. I still try to read that book once every couple of years. But just taking notes and being okay, when I get off this ship, boots on the ground, like I'm going to go for it. So it took me years, but I knew I had to start saving more money. I was really bad with my money. Most DJs are. Had to start saving more money, and I just put things in like stupid stuff. Like I got rid of my cable when
I was gonna say,
back.
like, how were you saving money? Like, what?
Anything I could do, man.
What were the steps you made sure this happened?
Anything I could do. Like one stupid thing, like I got rid of my cable. I remember having a battle with Comcast and being like, my cable is $190 a month, and then whenever I got it, it was like $70. Like, how did it go up that much? We had this like battle over the phone for like an hour, and then I finally was like, you know what? Just get rid of it. I don't need it anymore. I don't even barely watch TV. I'm not really into sports, which I feel like that's what a lot of people are still holding on to cable because sports are such a big thing. But fast forward 8 years later, I'm like a pioneer of that. Like everybody's getting rid of their cable now. You know what I mean? But anything I could think of, man, like, just trying to figure out how much money I was going to bring in week DJing, how I could make more money, how I could get more gigs that were going to pay more, and how I could put that money off to the side. I knew what I needed to live on. I was never really motivated by money. I was more motivated about just what's going to keep me happy.
Yeah.
But, at the time it was like, I knew I wanted to open a place because a lot of the places that I was working for, I had ideas. I had just ideas shooting out of my head, like all over the place. Like, I want to do this and I want to do this. And a lot of places just were like, no, we're happy with what we have going on and it's all good. And that was fine for them. That was totally cool. And at a certain point, my wife, I'll never forget, Nicole was like, you need to stop telling people your ideas. You need to stop. You need to start writing them down so you have them. And, whenever the bar does come around, you'll be able to implement them quick and nobody will have been doing doing them. So, and that is what really helped the Goldmark too. Just like, everything you see in the Goldmark was some kind of weird idea I got from somewhere.
Is that the notebook you were talking about?
That was a notebook, yeah.
That was the notebook.
I kept a notebook on my desk at home. I had like a little like studio kind of office at my house, and really small. And it was like turntables, my computer, my notebook sat there all the time. And I would come home, and Nicole was living with me at the time, and I would sit up for another half hour and I would just write stuff in the notebook. Like, I mean, I should have brought it. I should have just read you some stuff. Like the first thing I ever wrote was, don't be cheap. And I meant that because like there were so many times where I was trying to get an owner or somebody to like, let's bring in this guy because he throws parties over here and he might be able to bring a different crowd in or do this or do that. And no one ever wanted to do it because they were just so used to like, we're going to pay a DJ for 4 hours and that's the only money that we're going to throw up for the night. And don't get me wrong, sometimes that's all the money sometimes it doesn't even make sense to pay a DJ. I'll be honest with you, and I am a DJ. Sometimes we have nights where I'm like, I'm handing the DJ money, and I'm happy to hand the DJ money. I'm happy to pay them, but in the back of my mind, there's definitely nights where I'm like, man, I didn't need a DJ tonight because we're so dead, But that's the way the bar works. There's ups and downs, and it's a roller coaster. You know what I mean? You take the bad with the good. That's just the way the business is. But yeah, I mean, make sure you have a website up and running before the bar opens. Like stupid, get a photographer to take really good pictures of the place. Like all this different stuff that's like basically common sense, but you would be surprised how many people don't implement things like that whenever they do open a business. Not just a bar, just any kind of business. You know what I mean?
Right. So what was that timeline? Was that like what, 8-9 years from the cruise to you opening the Goldmark?
Cruise was 2010. I opened the Goldmark in 2015.
Okay, 5 years.
So it got really serious with the Goldmark. Excuse me. It got really serious. I started looking. Well, what happened was a place that I had worked at, I didn't even have the money ready. A place that I had worked at, Zimmy actually put me in touch with his real estate agent. And he was like, I think this place that you love is going to be for sale. So, and I'm not going to talk about what place it was or anything like that, but the real estate agent got in touch with me and he was like, look, Zimmy told me you're interested in this. If you want to take a look at it, I'll introduce you to the owners, blah, blah, blah. Well, it turns out that I had already worked there. I had thrown parties there. And we met. I had enough money to like do a certain portion of it, but I had to basically work a deal out with the owners where they would work with me on getting it to where I needed it to be. It's a really long, complicated money story, and it's terribly boring. So I'm not going to bother with that. But we worked with them. My wife was part of it too. She had money to put up to help it be even smoother. And oh God, man, it was a crazy year because it was like we were trying to work with banks. Banks don't want anything to do with bars and clubs. We were trying to work with nonprofits. We had a nonprofit that was ready to go. Then at the last minute, they just bailed out. It was like every down that you could get trying to open a business, we got punched in the face with it. And I'll never forget, we actually did manage to get everything lined up the way we needed it lined up. It had been almost a full year of meetings and back and forths and everything. And Nicole and I went to Florida. We went to Miami and Key West for like 3 days. And it was like our last hurrah before we were going to open this place up and take it over. And we were on our way back from Key West in a rental car, and my real estate agent called me and said, hey, they backed out of the deal. It was like we had like 5 days to go. So it was a full year of that. But what's really funny, it was a blessing, was that all this work that I had put in to do that, I was really down on myself. I was like, I don't even want to go through this again. I don't, even if somebody had the perfect bar right now, I don't even think I want to deal with this right now. It was so much work and so much bullshit. I was like, I don't even think I want to deal with this. So I ended up starting a wedding DJ company with a good friend of mine on the side. And we were working together on that. We launched that. And then literally like 3 months later, the real estate agent called me again and was like, hey, I have a place that's really close to the other place. It's exactly the same thing, but the inside needs a lot more work done. He's like, you're gonna have your work cut out with the inside. It's really old and dated. And he's like, do you want to take a look at it? And I'll never forget. It was a Sunday night. We were having beers at Nicole and I were with two of our friends at Mario's in the South Side, which is totally random. It was freezing. I remember being freezing. And I looked at Nicole and I was like, do you want to look at this? I was like, I don't know. I think I'm over it right now. Like maybe we'll revisit it in like a year. She was like, nah, let's go take a look at it. Like we have to see what it's like. So I was like, all right. So we went and looked at it the next day.
Okay.
And the minute we both walked in, we were like, oh, this would be perfect. Like we just knew there was a ton of work to do, but we were like, this could be really, really cool. Like it could be a really cool neighborhood spot. And, but the real estate agent was like, look, this sucks, but all that work you did in the last year for the other place? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, I hope you have a lot of it lined up. He goes, you have to submit everything. That was a Monday. He's like, you have to submit everything by tomorrow night. And it was like Monday at like noon. And I was like, what? He's like, you need to have all your bank stuff in line. You need to have everything in line. It was so much stuff. So we literally went home. I didn't sleep until that next night, Tuesday night. I called off my gig. I didn't sleep. I went home. I got everything together. It was just so much paperwork and BS. And we submitted everything. And the real estate agent was like, the guy who was selling it was like, he's going to look at the offers on Wednesday at noon. So this is like less than 48 hours. And we were like, all right. And we went to we didn't hear anything Wednesday. We went to dinner Wednesday night with two of our friends. My one friend who had actually just opened a bar.
Yeah.
And literally got the call at dinner that the guy went through all the offers and he picked us to buy the place. And it was so crazy because he was like, look, the real estate agent was like, look, I'm not going to lie. This must be meant to be because there was 5 offers on the table and you guys had the second to lowest offer. And we told the guy, we were like, this is all we could offer. But I talked to him. I was like, this is my dream. This is what I want to do. Like, here's my business plan. I had everything ready to go. And we got super lucky. The dude picked us and he worked with us a lot and it would have never happened without that dude. So, shout out to Terry.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So you as a business owner now, and I guess even your experience dealing with all these different bars and clubs in the past, like what do you think, what's your take? What's your perspective of, it kind of goes back to what we were saying, like the outside looking in. Like, is it as simple as, that saying, the club ain't shit unless the chicks are into it? Like, what I don't know. What are club people, in your opinion? What could they work on? Actually, I don't know because that might screw it up because you're giving
no.
ideas. All right, whatever.
It's fine.
So
man.
you could say that, or even just. I don't know, what's your take on the atmosphere of places? Like what needs to be implemented for it to be popping, in your opinion?
Sure. Well, I think it's funny because there was always a certain kind of place that I really enjoyed going to whenever I'd be out of town, or even in Pittsburgh. There were places that were kind of similar to the Goldmark whenever I was coming up. But I always enjoyed smaller places that were really, had dark lighting, nothing too flashy, and, there's so many different themes of bars and so many different ways you can go. I think every bar is different. There's places I like. It depends what kind of mood you're in. If it's a Sunday afternoon, there's a Steeler game going on. Trust me when I say this, I do not want to be in the Goldmark. Like, it's probably the last place you'd want to watch a football game. And, like, it's, I want to go to like, a sports bar or something along those lines. But I told my wife from day one, I was like, look, this is my skill set. This is what I know. I'm coming at this bar as a DJ, and from somebody who's been playing in bars for a really long time. And I knew we were going to have DJs all the time. So I told her, I said, I remember one time we were having a conversation about the Goldmark and we were remodeling the inside before we opened. And my wife was like, we should put a garage door in the front of the building, which would have been really cool. I'm not going to lie. But I also knew in my heart that every night we were going to be playing some loud ass music. We were probably never going to have that garage door open because it was going to be way too loud because it's a residential community in Lawrenceville. So I just knew, I was like, I'm going to go against that. And I would rather our place be like this little nook where it was like, if you walk by, you almost didn't even notice it, instead of having a garage door and then having to shut it every night and not, you know what I mean? Just like, I told her, I said, I don't envision our place being the kind of place where people are going to want to go there for a Sunday Steeler game. I just don't see it. It's not that kind of a vibe, but I do see it being a place on a Wednesday night we can have reggae music or DJs playing all soul vinyl 45s or something, and a certain crowd being like, this is cool. They can come in, they can chill, they can have a drink. Maybe the party gets turned up a little bit and, at midnight and they start dancing. And I told her, I'm like, but the thing that I really knew was that on the weekends is when you make the majority of your money, where you can, take care of all your overhead and then you have some left over. And I was like, we really need to maximize the weekend to make sure that we're throwing the best party and we have the best DJs in town and we're doing the most fun, events in the neighborhood and stuff like that, and there's tons of fun events in the neighborhood. I always catch myself because I'm like, I'm not dissing anybody, you know what I mean? But, yeah. And, she understood that and she was like, you're right. She's like, let's just come at it straight from like a DJ standpoint. Like, let it be this place where I always envisioned like 10 years down the road. Would this be a place that I would want to go to 10 years down the road? You know what I mean? I didn't want to have a theme or anything. Like if you go to the Goldmark, there's not really like a theme. It's kind of like, we have some art, there's some exposed brick, and there's just really good music. That's the theme, and nothing, the one thing that'll never get old is really good music, I remember telling my dad when I was like, I was probably 19 years old and I was going to do I was throwing these 18 and over parties with a buddy of mine. It was my first event in Pittsburgh. And I remember my dad being like, my parents were always really supportive and they were basically just like, look, if you're not going to go to school, you're going to have a job. And I was like, look, I'm throwing these parties. It's going to be awesome. And I remember my dad being like, listen, how long do you think you can be breakdancing and like throwing these parties? Like he was just asking me, I'm really close with my dad. And it took me like a second to answer him, but I was like, look, what year did you graduate from? My dad went to Slippery Rock. I was like, what year did you graduate from Slippery Rock? I can't remember what he said. And I was like, what did you do when you were in college? And he was like, I studied. And I was like, yeah, you did more than that though. And he was like, yeah, I went out and partied and, we were chasing girls and listening to music. And I go, yeah, guess what? It hasn't changed at all. At the end of the day, people are literally still doing the exact same thing now that they were doing 500 years ago. I'll even go that far. They're drinking, they're socializing, they want to go out, they want to forget about their problems, they want to go out and, have a good time, So I think that, anybody that's going to open a place or that is interested in doing something like that, I would always like go back to that. Like, how do I have a place where people are going to really enjoy themselves? You know what I mean?
What do you think has changed from when you started to now?
So I can tell you without a doubt, and you can talk to any DJ that's been DJing for a long time, the one thing that has changed, and, it's like, I literally call it the blessing and the curse. Technology is so crazy. Phones have really changed the atmosphere of nightlife. there's places in other cities now where you can't take a phone, or they'll make you. Oh yeah,
awesome.
It's a big thing. Yeah, we're actually we're talking about doing a party like this at Scenario, where it's like you check your phone at the door, you get a ticket, and then you go in and party. You're not on Instagram, you're not texting your friends.
So
like
you should
all your work.
Man.
Yeah, and
dope.
it's a real thing. I mean, if you think about it, like I remember going out with my friends before I even had a cell phone. It was just like, you're away from your parents. I was young at the time, so I'm away from my parents. And I'm just like living it up, man. Like, I'm going to dance. I'm going to talk to girls. I'm going to talk to my friends, and it's gotten so far from that, and I'm not going to say that doesn't still happen, because it definitely still happens. But, I think there's nights where I'm sitting at the Goldmark on a slow night, and there's 10 people sitting at the bar, and they're all sitting there on their phones. What
was it like then 20 years ago? These people would just somehow find a way to make conversation.
Well, yeah. I mean, instead of them, even if you were with, even if it was me and you, like, dude, we're just having a conversation right now. You know what I mean? Like, we could be having this exact same talk at a bar having a beer. It just happens to be that you're doing a podcast and I'm here, and this is it's a really cool thing. Like, this didn't exist for how long ago?
Yeah, crazy.
But it's what's really crazy is when I'm at Scenario and I look at the 300 people standing in front of me, because the majority of, let's say, a Saturday night, I'm in the DJ booth. Normally I'm hosting, I'm on the microphone. I'm kind of like the MC for the night. I'm shouting out girls throwing birthday parties and bachelorette parties, you name it. But there's times where the DJ will play like something really crazy, and you'll see this one pocket of like guys or girls, and they're going nuts, and they're like jumping up and down. They're just having the best time ever. None of them are on their phones, and then right next to them, there's like 5 dudes on their cell phones.
Damn.
And everybody's too worried about what everybody else is doing. Like, put your phone away and just live that moment of like, why you spent your whole night. This is really funny. I talk about this with DJs all the time. You spend your whole night on a Saturday, like you're getting ready. Maybe you're having a couple drinks at your apartment or your house or whatever. You're with your friends and you're like, we'll just use Scenario as an example. We're going to go to Scenario tonight. You go to Scenario. You walk in the door. You're taking it all in for a minute, and then you get on your phone. Does that sound like fun? Like, it sounds horrible, right?
Yeah.
Just put your phone away. Leave it in the car. Like, don't be worried about who posted the Instagram story, or what, Trump is tweeting at the time, or what meme is killing it. It's like, dude, save that shit for the only time I'm on my phone at all during a day is literally before I go to bed, and the first like 10 minutes whenever I wake up to check my stuff. And that's literally it. The rest of the day, unless I'm dealing with something with business that I have to be on my phone for, I'm working on stuff. I'm trying to figure out my next move. It's just, and then the last place that I would be sitting on my phone is the club. If you see me on the phone in the Goldmark, I might be doing something. I might be talking to somebody. I'm definitely not just scrolling through Instagram, or Facebook. I can't stand Facebook.
Oh, man.
So, I just, if anybody's out there listening to this, the next time you go out, just go out and have fun. Like, talk to the person sitting next to you, and you'll be amazed how good it feels when you just meet a random stranger.
Yeah.
Even if you're a single guy, talk to a girl. If she says no way and denies you, dude, at least you learned what not to say.
Yeah. Actually, all right, this will be I guess a good transition. Speaking of girls, and how was that, like, your whole time DJing? Like, I guess, yeah, being in relationships, like, what was that like? We go back to what we were saying, like being a loner. It's like a non-traditional path, you would say, right?
Oh, yeah.
So like, what does that look like? And then you obviously end up meeting your wife somehow. So maybe you could start off talking about like how your relationships were, going in or being in the DJ industry and coming up with that, and then eventually, meeting your wife, and like how that works out now. Because you guys are obviously working on the bar, and together.
Yeah, so. I mean, obviously we live together and we work together every day, and we see each other all the time. So I would say, through my 20s, I had numerous girlfriends while I was DJing full time. Definitely not the easiest thing, and I think it takes a certain kind of female to deal with something like that. Yeah. Some of the girls I dated were really good at dealing with it. Some of them were terrible at it,
Are they just coming up to you after
No,
you're done
dude,
DJing? You're the man.
you would think it's like that, but that's very rare. Yeah, I know a lot of DJs that actually does happen to, and they're obviously way better looking than I am, which is good for them. But no, I mean that it's happened. I'm not gonna say it's never happened. It's definitely happened, but it was rare for me. But it's like I would just use my wife as an example. I met Nicole because she was coming in. She kept coming into a gig that I had on Friday nights, and she might only be there for like an hour, and she always came in like by herself or like met one other girl there or something. And I'm like, she would always come up and be like, "Hey, I really like what you're playing." And like that was rare at the time. Like it was very rare for somebody to give you a compliment. It's almost like reading reviews these days. You know what I mean? It's like, how often do you see the good reviews? Hardly ever. It's mostly
True.
most people that review, they just want to talk shit. So for her to do that, I always remembered her.
Well, I guess early in the night too, right?
It would actually be later in the night.
Okay.
Yeah, she would come in and I was like, this girl always comes in for like an hour and just comes up and goes, "Hey, I really like the music. You're doing great." And like, I didn't take it weird. I didn't take it as she was like hitting on me or anything. And she wasn't. Like she's told me like, "No, I just wanted to tell you you're doing a good job." So it turned out that, we ended up becoming friends almost through that exposure. Like I would see her and be like, "Hey, what's going on?" And I found out that she had been coming home from work. She lived like a block away. She always came in and got like one drink and then like went home. So I was like, "Oh, how was work?" We just started talking like that. And at the time when I first met her, I was actually in another relationship, and I had no intentions of ever hitting on her or anything. I was just like, it's cool that this girl is being nice. But then, I learned what music she liked. She would always come in and request Sean Paul and Jay-Z and like all these like, rappers and singers from the early 2000s. And from there, I figured out how old she was. That was another thing with DJing. Like you always kind of figure out how old people were from their requests. Like you're like, "Huh, I bet you're like 25 or whatever." But yeah, but it's funny because her and I ended up, we eventually got into a relationship and got serious. And whenever I had been through so much with females up to that point, I remember having a conversation with her when we were getting serious, and I was like, "Look, I just have to let you know this now because I don't want it to be awkward moving forward." And I was like, "I am not moving from Pittsburgh. I just bought a house, and I am going to open a bar someday." And she was like, "Okay, that sounds great," but I don't think it really sunk in.
Yeah.
She was from Philadelphia. And, moving forward, she became to understand how passionate I was about that idea and saw it. Like, I think when I said it then, she was like, "Yeah, that's cool. Whatever you want to do." But then moving forward, she would, I'd have these talks with her about the places I worked at and how I wanted to open a place and all this different stuff. So it kind of grew on her, and she saw how passionate I was about it. And, but to this day, she's the only girl that I ever dated that I met while I was DJing.
Really?
Yeah, but that was like my girlfriend. Really? So that's a really funny thing. Yeah.
That's
I talked to other girls, and I might have went out with other girls, but she was the only one that I ever met while I was out DJing where I was like, "Oh, I think I would actually like maybe start a relationship with this girl." So yeah, now we're married. She's the co-owner of my bar and our bar.
Dude, that's so interesting. So that's honestly you saying that though, wherever you were like, "Listen, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
This is how I'm gonna live. Like this is my plan for the next like 5-10 years." Like
yeah,
it's either you're like on board or not. Like that's, I don't know. Maybe you can attest to that. I don't know how common that is, right?
Me neither. I have no idea, man. All I know is that.
But, I mean, it's interesting to hear where you're just like, "Yo, like I'm on this path." Like
yeah. Well, I think I told her too. Like I think it was really important in that time in my life to set goals and try to accomplish those goals.
You're reading all the self-development books.
Oh yeah, this was like right around. I had always been like that. But I always thought setting goals was really important, and especially when you work for yourself, it's insanely important because you can't just keep doing the same thing. You got to try to keep moving forward and progressing, So, I remember talking to her and being like, "Look, in the next 5 years, this is what it's going to be. This is the goal, So And I always have that in the back of my head. Like, I still have goals now that I'm like 5-10 years from now, what I want to be doing, you know? So, and she gets that, you know, and she's had a full-time day job forever since I've met her. And she still has it. And she still is a co-owner of a bar and still does a ton of stuff. So she actually works even more than I do, you know? So I have the utmost respect for her. And that was a big reason too, that I was like, you know, this is my ride or die. Like, she's a workaholic like I am. She's not afraid to you know, to get her hands dirty and, you know, dig into different stuff that she's interested in too. So yeah.
That's fascinating, dude. So yo, I'm gonna wrap it up with this one.
Yeah, I know it's getting kind of long.
You ready?
Yeah. Thank you for having me, man.
Bro, no problem. How do you define success?
I knew you were gonna ask me like a really hard question. I really believe that, you know, and I think everything that I would tell somebody or any kind of advice that I would give to somebody, I always joke around because it's always like the same corny stuff that you hear from books and everything. But I have to be honest with you. It's not money at all. If you can just wake up and be happy, I've been really lucky my entire life. Not that I haven't worked for it, but I've always just thought that I was lucky because I always got to wake up and do something that I enjoy. And I swear, I say this all the time. If you would cut the money in half from up to this point, bar, DJing, whatever it was that I was doing, I would still be doing the same shit. It wouldn't matter to me. I'd still be doing the same thing. You know, I might try to figure out a way to make up for that money, but I swear, like, people used to always ask me that, like, when DJing was really, really good for me, I was doing really well. And I was like, man, you know, I'm really lucky. Like, I literally work like 4 hours a night, and I would be working the whole day on DJ stuff, but I never considered it work. And it wasn't until my wife moved in with me where she was like, you work way more than 4 hours a day. You're just talking about when you're going to DJ. And I'd be like, oh yeah, I guess you're right. Like, I'm working on mixtapes or whatever it might be at the house, you know,
true.
Or like running around meeting people or whatever. But yeah, I think success, man, is just waking up happy every day and doing something that you enjoy. I think it's that simple.
I would agree, dude. That's been a constant thread of people I've asked that. They talk about happiness, and
yeah,
it seems like that's it. Honestly, at this point in my life too, I've probably never been broker right now, but I'm happier than ever. It's crazy, you know.
That's huge. David Allen said the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, he was, you know. And I remember when that dude was driving around like the craziest Porsche, and he had like, you know, he was stepping out in like the flyest gear, and he was killing it. And well, he's still wearing the flyest gear, obviously.
Exactly.
But yeah, you know, he said it. He was like, you know, I'm happy. He's doing something that he really enjoys. And, you know, like, I don't listen to Gary Vaynerchuk, you know.
Yeah, I know.
He's great. I don't listen to a ton of his stuff, but there's something that he always says sticks in my mind where he always talks about the process. He's like, I'm successful because I really enjoy the process of becoming successful.
Right.
And that always sticks out to me because you don't even think about it when you're doing something you love, but you're going through this process of trying to make it better and better and better. And I think that's really important for anybody that works on anything. You have to really enjoy. You can't just enjoy the fruits of your labor. You have to enjoy the labor itself, you know? So yeah, I think that's it. And I'm not saying that it's easy to do what you love. I'm not saying that. It's definitely can be challenging, but I think no matter what, you know, my friend's mom actually said this to me when I was like 21 years old. And I was trying to like really DJ to the max. She was like, how's DJing going? I was like, it's cool. I wish I was making a little bit more money doing it. She was like, we were in an elevator moving into an apartment. She was helping me move in. She was like, well, you just keep doing something you love. The money will eventually come, you know? And like, I didn't think anything of it when she said it, but now I think back to that all the time. And it's so true, man. You just keep chipping away at something, and eventually the money will eventually come. And then you'll be like, oh, wow, I can actually make money doing this. So
that's nice, bro. Yo,
that's the long answer.
Appreciate you coming on, man.
Thank you, Deke. I appreciate you, man.
Freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We have to hang out more, man.
Definitely.
Sure, anytime.
Any just last shout outs, anything like that?
Shout out to my wife, man. She's the best. I know I talked about her a lot, but Nicole, I love you. You're the shit. Thank you for helping me, you know, bring my dreams to fruition here. And shout out to all my DJ friends and everybody grinding and all the music lovers and anybody who's ever stepped foot in the Goldmark scenario. I appreciate you more than you know. And if you come up to me and say, hey, you want to do a podcast? Just ask Deke. You know I'll do it. Nah, I'm just like,
That's
yeah.
awesome, man. Everyone, thanks for listening and stay chilling. Peace.